It was a quiet, typical Tuesday morning. The world outside seemed still, as though it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, something that would break the serene rhythm of everyday life. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft, golden glow through the blinds of our living room window. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring a cup of coffee, its rich aroma filling the room and providing me with the much-needed jolt of energy to start my day. The silence in the house was comforting, almost like a cocoon of peace wrapping around me as I went about my routine. My baby, Emily, was in her playpen by the window, happily entertained by her little toys. Her laugh, so pure and full of joy, echoed in the stillness of the morning as she played with her stuffed bear. Emily had always been a ray of sunshine in our home. With her chubby cheeks, big brown eyes, and an infectious giggle that could melt anyone's heart, she was the kind of baby you couldn't help but adore. I had set her in the playpen while I went about my morning ritual, getting ready for work. She was content, and so was I. It was the kind of morning that made everything feel right in the world. There were no signs of trouble, no hint that anything could disrupt the peaceful routine we had grown accustomed to. The hum of the refrigerator, the sound of birds chirping outside, and the quiet whir of the coffee machine created a lull that made the day seem like it would unfold without a single hitch. I moved through my morning tasks, shaving, brushing my teeth, getting dressed, and with each action, the comforting predictability of life reaffirmed itself. As a parent, there's a certain safety in this rhythm, a sense of control that comes from knowing exactly what to expect. And, like any parent, I cherished it. But the sense of calm wasn't just born out of my immediate surroundings. It came from knowing that I lived in a place that, for all its quirks, was generally safe. We lived in a well-maintained, middle-class apartment complex nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The Homeowners Association, HOA, an entity that often rubbed people the wrong way with its strict rules and regulations, always made sure the lawns were mowed, the streets were clean, and everyone kept their properties in tip-top shape. To most of us, that was a good thing. It meant we didn't have to worry about unkempt yards, loud parties, or cars being parked inappropriately. The HOA was, in many ways, the invisible hand that kept everything running smoothly, even if their love for order sometimes felt a little overbearing. The neighbors, too, seemed harmless enough, if a little eccentric at times. Everyone had their quirks, their little routines that you grew to recognize. Some neighbors kept to themselves, while others liked to chat on the balcony or in the courtyard. The complex was a mix of families, young professionals, and retirees, and while there were the usual disagreements, disputes over parking spots, trash bins left out too long, nothing ever felt dangerous. It was a community that, despite its rules, allowed for a sense of safety and belonging. Then there was Karen. If you'd asked anyone in the complex to describe her, they'd likely tell you she was the neighborhood watchdog. She was always walking around with a clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning the parking lot for violations, her ears tuned to any disturbance in the air. Karen was the type of person who couldn't resist making sure everyone adhered to the HOA's rules. She would walk around, checking people's lawns to ensure they were perfectly manicured, make sure your trash cans were placed exactly where they were supposed to be, and if your car was parked just a little too close to someone else's, you could count on her to leave a note on your windshield. Karen's intensity bordered on obsessive, but she was harmless, or so I thought. She wasn't malicious in the way that some people can be. No, Karen had a misplaced sense of responsibility, a desire to control the world around her and make sure everything followed the letter of the law. Some might have found her annoying, even intrusive, but I never thought she was anything to worry about. After all, she was just a concerned neighbor, right? One of those people who took the rules a little too seriously, but who would never actually cross a line. In fact, I had never even considered her as a threat. To me, Karen was just another character in the neighborhood's daily theater. I'd see her walking her dog on the sidewalk, nodding at her as we passed, but never exchanging more than a polite hello. We didn't have a close relationship, but I figured that was just the way things were. She was part of the complex's fabric, a fixture like the trees or the mailboxes. I didn't know much about Karen's background, but I knew she was older, possibly in her early 50s, with a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor. Her hair was always neatly styled, her clothes pressed to perfection, and her voice had that authoritative tone that made you feel like you were being lectured even when you hadn't done anything wrong. To her, the HOA's rules weren't just guidelines, they were the gospel. Her word was law, and she made sure everyone knew it. But as I prepared for another day of work, I didn't give Karen or the HOA much thought. I was too focused on getting my baby fed, getting myself out the door, and making it through another busy day at the office. The world outside was already awake, bustling with its own agenda. Cars zoomed past on the road, and the hum of morning activity filled the air. But within the confines of our apartment, it was calm, almost peaceful. I kissed Emily on the forehead, her little hands reaching for me as I stood to gather my things. She gurgled happily, still playing with her toys, blissfully unaware of anything beyond the safe walls of our home. I grabbed my bag, slinging it over my shoulder, and checked one last time to make sure I had everything I needed before heading out the door. It was a routine I had done 1,000 times, and every time I felt the same quiet sense of satisfaction. Life was simple. Life was good. What I didn't know then was that in that very moment, the calm was only a facade. The world outside might have seemed steady, but everything was about to change in ways I couldn't have imagined. The very peace I took for granted was about to be shattered, and I would soon learn that not everyone in the world operated under the same assumptions of kindness and goodwill. It only takes a moment, a single, seemingly insignificant event, to transform your life from normal to unrecognizable. And I had no idea that in the quiet hum of a Tuesday morning, I was standing on the precipice of an unimaginable storm. The sound of my phone buzzing on the kitchen counter snapped me out of my thoughts. I had just finished packing my lunch and was about to leave when I noticed the screen flashing. It was a notification from my security app alerting me of motion near the front door. My mind was still foggy from the rush of the morning, but a strange, sudden tension twisted in my stomach. I hesitated for a moment before pulling up the live video feed. At first, the image seemed perfectly normal, just the quiet hallway outside our apartment door. But then I saw it. Someone was standing in front of my door. My breath caught in my throat as I quickly zoomed in on the figure, the sharp lines of her face emerging clearly on the screen. It was Karen. I felt a cold chill run through me. Why was she standing outside my door so early? I hadn't seen her around when I left for work, and the whole thing felt strange. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The calm morning I had just experienced felt like a distant memory now. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that clung to me, but it only grew worse. I swiped the screen to exit the security app, but my phone buzzed again almost immediately, this time with a new notification: motion detected in the laundry room. I froze. The laundry room. It was on the other side of our apartment, the door just off the hallway near the kitchen, and the thought of it made my heart race. Emily. My immediate instinct was to drop everything and rush home, but I was already halfway out the door. I hadn't known what was going on. I pulled the phone back up, panic creeping into my veins, and checked the feed for the laundry room. The sight that greeted me was nothing short of terrifying. The laundry room door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway from the other side. And then, through the narrow opening, I saw Emily sitting in the corner, her little face twisted in distress, her hands pressed against the door as if she were trying to escape. Her cries reached me through the speakers of my phone, high-pitched and desperate, echoing through the quiet apartment. It was like a punch to the gut, and every rational thought left me in an instant. My hands trembled as I watched my baby, her tiny body visibly shaking, trapped inside the laundry room. How did she get in there? In that moment, the world felt as though it had been ripped from under my feet. How had this happened? Emily was only just starting to crawl. There was no way she could have gotten to the laundry room by herself. Her playpen, where I had left her moments earlier, was still in the living room on the other side of the apartment. My mind raced, but before I could even think of what to do next, another figure appeared on the screen. It was Karen again. She walked past the laundry room with a look of satisfaction on her face, as though she had just completed some kind of mission. She didn't even glance at the room, didn't seem to acknowledge Emily's cries. Instead, she went on her way, her footsteps fading down the hall. A sickening realization gripped me. Karen had done this. I slammed the phone down, my heart racing so fast I could hear the thudding in my ears. My body moved, on instinct, the adrenaline coursing through me as I ran back to the apartment. The trip back felt like it took hours, each second dragging by, as if the world was moving in slow motion. I could already picture Emily, terrified and alone in that room, her cries still echoing in my mind. I could hear her pleading for help. My baby. My baby was locked in that room. The apartment door opened with a burst of urgency, and I ran inside, my eyes scanning for any sign of movement. It didn't take long to find her. Emily was still in the laundry room, her sobs muffled by the thick wooden door. I had never felt such fear, such helplessness, as I did in that moment. Every second felt like an eternity. I yanked the door open, my hands shaking as I reached for her. Her tiny body trembled in my arms as I scooped her up, her cries quieting only when I held her close. I kissed her forehead, tears welling in my eyes. "I'm so sorry, baby," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Mommy's here. You're safe now." But as I hugged her, the rage inside me began to boil. I felt it rise, slowly at first, but quickly consuming me as I realized what had happened. Someone I had trusted to be a responsible part of this community had locked my child in that room. And that someone was Karen. There was no doubt in my mind now. Karen had done this. I carried Emily back into the living room, my hands still shaking, my mind racing with questions. Why? Why would she do this? What possible justification could there be for locking a baby in a room and leaving her alone? My body trembled with anger, with disbelief. How could someone who called herself a neighborhood watchdog, someone who prided herself on enforcing rules, do something so cruel, so inhuman? I put Emily down in her playpen, making sure she was okay before grabbing my phone again. I had to know for certain. I had to see it for myself. I pulled up the video feed. One more time, my heart thumping in my chest as I fast-forwarded the footage. The image of Karen walking past the laundry room door again filled the screen. She was still carrying her clipboard, her usual air of self-righteousness hanging over her like a cloud. She paused in front of the laundry room door, her eyes glancing at it for a moment. Then, with a deliberate motion, Karen reached for the door handle. She twisted it, and with a quiet click, the door was locked. She stepped away, a smug smile briefly appearing on her face, and then walked down the hallway without a second glance at the child she had just abandoned. I froze, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. The video didn't lie. The truth was right there in front of me. It was Karen. She had locked my baby in that room, without any explanation, without any remorse. And she had done it all while fully aware of what she was doing. I felt sick, my stomach churning at the thought of what could have happened. If I hadn't gotten the motion notification, if I hadn't checked the camera feed, what could she have done to my child? The questions swirled around in my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. But one thought remained clear in my mind: I couldn't let her get away with this. The days that followed were a blur of anger, confusion, and disbelief. Once the shock of what Karen had done began to settle, a new wave of emotions took its place, fury and a determination that grew stronger with each passing moment. I would not let this slide. There were laws, rules, and boundaries that should have protected my child, and yet Karen had crossed them all, not just in spirit, but in action. The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how cold and deliberate her actions had been. That night, after Emily had fallen asleep, I sat down with my phone and watched the footage over and over again. The video was damning, each frame showing Karen's unmistakable involvement. The image of her walking past my door, pausing to lock my baby in the laundry room, played like a loop in my mind, a scene I couldn't escape. The more I watched, the more I could see Her smirk, the way she checked over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching, how she had left Emily alone with no regard for her safety or well-being. It made me sick to my stomach, and the more I replayed it, the angrier I became. I knew what I had to do. The footage was irrefutable. I needed to show it to the HOA to make sure Karen faced the consequences of her actions. The very idea of her still roaming freely in our community, while my baby could have been hurt, was maddening. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone else being subjected to her cruelty. The next morning, I marched down to the HOA office. I felt a fire inside me, a quiet fury that pushed me forward, step by step. I had taken time off work, telling my boss there was an emergency at home. The urgency I felt wasn't something I could explain, but I needed action. Now, when I arrived, the usual calmness of the HOA office was replaced by a tense atmosphere. The receptionist greeted me as she always did. But today, there was a subtle hesitation in her eyes as she saw the determination etched on my face. "I need to speak with the board." Now, I said, my voice more forceful than I intended. Her eyes widened, and she motioned for me to wait. After what seemed like an eternity, I was ushered into a small conference room. A few members of the board sat around the table, their faces expectant. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I immediately pulled up the video footage and played it for them. The room was silent as Karen's actions unfolded before them. There was no mistaking what they saw. Her hands twisting the door handle with deliberate care, locking my baby inside that room. The discomfort in the air was palpable, but no one spoke. The truth was right there, undeniable and unyielding. When the video finished, the room was still. I waited, my arms crossed tightly over my chest, my gaze unwavering. The board members exchanged uneasy looks, and for a moment I thought they might try to downplay it, sweep it under the rug. But to their credit, they didn't. The HOA president, a woman named Linda, was the first to speak. This is appalling," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We cannot allow this kind of behavior in our community." I could see the gravity of the situation hitting her as she glanced down at the table, visibly shaken. One of the other board members, a man named Greg, cleared his throat. "We will be investigating this immediately," he said firmly, his voice tinged with a mix of anger and disbelief. "This is a violation of trust, and it's unacceptable. Karen's behavior is completely out of line." I nodded, feeling a small sense of relief wash over me. I hadn't known what to expect, whether they would take it seriously or try to dismiss it. But this was the response I needed. This was the first step toward justice for Emily. But even as they spoke about investigating and taking action, my mind raced. I knew Karen. She wouldn't go down quietly. She wasn't someone who accepted defeat easily. I had seen it in her before. Her way of trying to manipulate the situation, to play the role of the victim in a scenario where she was clearly the perpetrator. I couldn't let that happen. "I want this to go beyond just an investigation," I said, my voice cold and determined. "I want this on the record. I want this to be dealt with in the strongest way possible. No one should be allowed to hurt my child. No one should feel safe knowing someone like Karen is walking around unchecked." The board members exchanged another round of looks, and then Linda spoke again, more firmly this time. "We will take this to the highest authority in the HOA," she assured me. "Karen will not escape the consequences of her actions. We will act swiftly." With those words, I finally felt the weight of the situation begin to shift. The power dynamics of the HOA, the insular, unspoken rules of neighborhood life, were no longer in Karen's favor. Now, it was time for her to face the consequences. Over the next few days, the board initiated their investigation. The video footage was distributed among the other residents, and people were horrified by what they saw. As word spread, Karen's once untouchable reputation began to crumble. Residents who had once been cowed by her scrutiny began speaking up, sharing their own experiences of her intrusive behavior. No one had suspected she was capable of something so cruel. But now that the truth was out, they were all shaken by how far she had gone. The HOA issued an official statement, removing Karen from her position. She was given a formal warning for her behavior, But that wasn't enough for me. Karen's actions had not just violated the rules, they had violated the basic trust we had in one another as neighbors, as human beings. She had crossed a line that could never be erased. I knew I couldn't let her slip back into the shadows of the complex, continuing to exert control over others. I filed a formal complaint with the local authorities, demanding a full investigation into Karen's actions. The more I pushed, the more I realized how important it was for this to be taken seriously, not just within our community, but on a larger scale. Karen's behavior wasn't just an HOA violation. It was a matter of personal safety, a violation of what it meant to be a responsible adult, a member of a community. As the legal proceedings began, I held my breath, waiting for the hammer to fall. Emily, blissfully unaware of the turmoil her mother was going through, played quietly in the corner of the room, her innocent giggles serving as a reminder of why I couldn't back down. This wasn't just about me or Karen, it was about making sure no other parent would have to face the terror I had. The truth had come to light, and the pieces were finally falling into place. But I knew this was just the beginning. The fight for justice had only just begun. The fight for justice doesn't stop here. If you've ever felt the sting of unfair treatment or witnessed something that shouldn't be tolerated, now is the time to speak up. Join us on the HOA Denied Access channel for more stories, updates, and crucial information on how to stand up against injustice in your own community. Whether you're facing issues with overbearing HOA rules, unethical neighbors, or violations of your rights, we're here to help you take action. Don't stay silent. Subscribe now to HOA Denied Access, and let's work together to ensure our communities are safe, respectful, and fair for everyone. Your voice matters, and it's time to demand change. Together, we can hold those in power accountable.